Hi everybody, this is Gail and it's Saturday morning here. Sorry I'm a little late posting this video. It's the holiday season. Um, I wanted to go over a little bit on the papers that are due and on your Pico question. So we delayed the problem description paper 1 to the second week. So I went in and all of you guys should have that Dropbox reassigned so that come Wednesday night by midnight you can put paper 1 in there. And then also now, since we delayed it a week, you also have the literature review table for week 2 is due Wednesday night as well. So we'll cover the problem description first. The main thing with the problem description is to not only present your Pico template, and that is actually as an attachment on the assignment. There's a template where you write out your Pico question. And you're going to do it in paper 1, the problem description. You're going to attach it as an appendices. And if you look in your APA book, appendices actually go after the reference list. And you label each one Appendix A, Appendix B, one appendix per table, or in this case, your Pico template, one per page. And this will become more important as you get towards the end of the assignments and the final project, because you'll have lots of appendices placed with those, especially with the final project. In paper 2, or the literature review table, you also place as an appendices your Pico template. And why you do that is they ask you to update your Pico question. So many of you may have already formed one, and I'm going to give you some feedback on it. And then you may have already received feedback from me, and so you may alter it a little bit, or as you look into your literature review table, you may alter it a little bit. And that's why you post the 2 Pico templates, your original one and then how you've updated it. And actually in paper 2, I'm carrying that over. I think that's in paper 3, but there's a section of how you've updated your Pico since you've looked at the literature and found out a little bit more about your subject, how you've had to actually go through and update that question. So it's okay if your Pico question evolves through the semester. That's fine. You find out more. You may tweak your population a little bit, your wording a little bit, and that's okay. Just you don't have to write every paper over again. At the final paper, you will make revisions so that that whole paper flows together and it's all talking about the same thing. So we'll make revisions in that one. Your final paper is all the components together, placed in one final project with a bunch of appendices at the end. So every time you receive a paper back from me and receive feedback, then you'll incorporate all those revisions in there and save it to put into the final project. There are certainly papers in the first few ones you'll get lots of feedback on, and then sometimes there's weeks where I just may do a pass or fail. Like, I know that they know how to set up APA format. I know their Pico question now is solid. I'm just going to breeze through this. I don't need to pick apart everything. I'm going to do a pass or fail. But I do get pretty detailed with these initial ones until I kind of know what you're doing and know what your writing style is, and make sure that we're both on the same page. So the part A problem description, I did have the assignment right up here in front of me. Let me see if I can get it again here. Otherwise, I'll just, I am posting a template of it, of how to set up your paper, and a student example of problem descriptions before this. Now, GCU goes in all the time, and they change these assignments on me. So my examples and my template papers don't always catch up with those. You always need to check the assignment and make sure that you are getting all those criteria and you have a header for all those criteria. That's how I grade your papers, is I look at those headers and then I know where you've answered the question for that particular criteria in the assignment. And if you don't have any headers in there, I spend a lot of time having to seek out that information, and your grade will reflect that I got frustrated trying to find it. So make it easy for yourself so that you know you met all these criteria by placing those headers, and definitely make it easier for the person who's grading the paper. That's always a good idea. So in the problem description, I'll put out that template and stuff like that. I'm going to mess up my screen here if I try to bring up the actual assignment now. Um, the other part is part B, week 2, which is a literature review table. And they give you a template to fill out, and it says to do like 12 references. Well, at this point in your research, you probably don't have 12 references. And since you have 2 assignments due in the same week, I'm not going to do that to you. If you can come up with 4 to 6 references to place in that table and ask all those questions and describe all those things it is asking you to do within the table, then that's fine. And there's some other criteria within that assignment where you'll have a little bit of written work too, and then your Pico question template attached as an appendices as well, saying how you morphed your Pico question if you had to. So only 4 to 6 references at this point. By the time you get done with this total project, you're going to have probably 3 pages of references, if not more, that you have on there. But at this point, I don't ask you to do this. So I did want to spend some time going over the Pico questions. Some brave people had a chance, and the people that were also brave just didn't have a chance, I'm sure, because we're busy. It's Thanksgiving week, going into the holidays, but they posted their Pico. And so I'm going to take a look at those with you guys and kind of tell you about the Pico, why I make the comments that I do. So, I don't know if I'm saying this right. Chidi Amesi posted her question, or his question, as among registered practicing nurses on the medical telemetry unit, do the application of nurse-patient proportions and break times lower nurses' burnout and increase nurses' satisfaction compared to nurses with heavy workloads over 12 months? So, mostly, this has everything that we need. It's saying, does the application of nurse-patient proportions or ratios and break times lower nurse burnout and increase satisfaction? So the only thing that I am missing here is, what was my comment? I'm sorry. I find myself a little lost here all of a sudden. I'm 55 years old. So she has, they have a comparison group on this. So that's is compared to nurses with heavy workloads over 12 months. But there's some ambiguities in here. So everything has to be very specific. So among registered nurses on the medical telemetry unit, I would be very specific with that and say, what geographic area we're looking at. Are we looking at New York City? Are we looking at a rural hospital somewhere in the Southwest? These things do make a difference with staffing and things like that. So what you implement a project, if you implement a project in a rural hospital or a mid-sized hospital in the Southwest, and they try to implement that same type of project or research in a New York City busy hospital during COVID, things may be totally different. So that's why I have you be very specific where these registered nurses that you're sampling going to be at. They were specific and said medical telemetry unit. And then it says, does the application of nurse-patient proportions or nurse-patient ratios and break times? So I would say, and mandatory break times, because everybody has the break time. They just don't usually take it as a nurse, or they take it during their lunch break to make their lunch break a little bit longer. Usually we get a 30-minute break and 2 15-minute breaks during the 12-hour shift. That never really worked for me. The only people who took their break times were the smokers. They definitely always took them, and I always covered. Because I didn't want to work with anybody that hadn't their smoke break, because they were having a bad day if they didn't get their smoke break. So what I would do is really kind of hone down on this. So does the application of enforced nurse-patient ratios and mandatory break times lower, we don't want to say lower, we want to be specific and say decrease nurse burnout and increase nurse satisfaction rates? And then we want to say how we're going to measure this. I would say as measured by nurse satisfaction surveys compared to nurses with heavy workloads. Well, that's ambiguous. I'm sorry, that's vague. And so what is a heavy workload to one nurse that may be different than the other? So you can't say heavy workloads. You have to just say compared to nurses with something else. So I would just say compared to nurses with no enforced nurse patient ratios and no mandatory break times over a 12-month study period. That's what I would do with it. And I added to that a little bit since I replied to yours in the thread because I just saw that here. Also know that it's very good and it's going to make your life easier because the goal is to get to graduation. This is a hypothetical project. There's no way you can implement all of this in an 8-week period and collect data and all that. So this is hypothetical. So make it easy on yourself. I would run a pilot project. A pilot project is where you are looking at a research study, and whether it's exact or whether you're loosely interpreting it into a project that you're doing a very small scale one to test things before you invest a lot of time and a lot of money, a lot of staff resources on it. So I don't know, pilot projects could involve 10 nurses, 25 nurses, at the most maybe 50. I wouldn't even maybe carry it out for a whole year because that's a whole lot of time invested for you to find out that you need to change your methodology. So things that you find out during these pilot studies where you're looking at a very, very small sample over a small period of time is you get to look at that survey. Say that you're going to survey these nurses. There's plenty of validated surveys out there on nurse satisfaction. Validated meaning that you find a survey that's already been done, it's in the research, it's been validated, and then you can use it in your project. So you don't want to use an invalidated survey, just something that you made up, because say that the questions are hard to understand, or they start measuring something you don't want to measure because you've never tried out this survey, then it skews your whole study. So you want to look for validated surveys. Say that you have something super different than what's out there and you're trying to survey and sample your participants on their knowledge acquisition or preference or their satisfaction. If you can't find a survey that's out there that's validated, or you find one that's validated, but you want to tweak a few questions, that's fine, but you must validate it. If you take a validated survey and you change anything, you must revalidate it. If you come up with your own survey, you must validate it. And how you do that is you give it to a sample of those people that you're going to be studying, and you ask them to take the survey and you say, give me some feedback on this. And you also have them actually answer the questions. And you see if you're actually measuring what you want to measure. You ask them for feedback on were the questions tough, were they vague, did they not make any sense? You always want to put things at a 3rd grade reading level, things like that. You want to do your surveys that way. So in your small pilot study, this is how you can test these things. The other things that you can do is find out if the population that you're sampling is exactly what you want. Have you put in the right exclusion and inclusion components? So say among registered practicing nurses on the medical telemetry unit, well, what kind of things, what kind of variables could enter into that to cause you problems? Well, let's say that I forgot that there were 5 brand new nurses on there. We know that their stress level is high no matter what for probably the first 2 to 3 years. So I don't want to include them in their sample because it's not really comparing apples to apples. So I want to look at registered nurses in my sample that have been in practice on this unit. You know, they're not new to this unit, things like that. They haven't just moved to the area. They aren't contract nurses that are there for 6 months and gone. So I would say among registered practicing nurses, you know, and then you don't have to say it in your Pico question, but in your problem description and how you're going to arrange your project and your study, is that these nurses have been on the unit for at least 1 year, okay? There's various other variables that you just don't know are going to come out until you try it. And that's why you do a pilot study. The other thing is when you write your problem description and all your other papers down the road, everything that you put in there, you have to define. So when we look at nurse